You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode of the podcast, we're reviewing match number 10 of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between South Africa and Australia. And it was a pretty comprehensive victory for South Africa in the end, winning by 134 runs. Definitely in form in this World Cup, South Africa. They've won the first two games. They're off to a good start in this World Cup. On the other hand, it was a pretty poor performance from Australia. One of their worst ever World Cup defeats. 134 runs is a big margin of defeat. And for Australia, they've 0-2 to start their World Cup campaign, which has put them on the back foot severely in terms of trying to qualify for the semi-finals at the back end of the tournament. So Australia are definitely up against it, and it wasn't their great performance. So there's plenty to discuss on this episode of the podcast today, reviewing this match between South Africa and Australia of the World Cup. Plenty to talk about for both teams in terms of how they perform with the bat and with the ball, and what sort of challenges do present them going forward in terms of their next matches and so on. So plenty to discuss on this episode of the podcast today. Let's have a look at the match summary from match number 10 of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between South Africa and Australia from the BRSA BVE Cricket Stadium. South Africa batted first and made 7 for 311 from their 50 overs. Quinton de Kock top scored with 109. Glenn Maxwell and Mitchell Starc took 2 wickets each for Australia. Australia needed 312 runs to win. They were bowled out for 177 in 40.5 overs. Marnus Labuschagne top scored with 46, and Kagiso Rabada took 3 wickets for South Africa. South Africa won by 134 runs, and Quinton de Kock was named Player of the Match. What were the key moments and key factors from match number 10 of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between South Africa and Australia? Quinton de Kock's innings of 109 plus the partnerships of 108 for the first wicket between de Kock and Bavuma, 50 for the second wicket between de Kock and van der Dussen, and 66 for the fourth wicket between Markram and Klaasen were key for South Africa to post their score of 7 for 311. South Africa's bowling to have Australia 6 for 70 inside 17.2 overs to put Australia under pressure with the ball, to bowl Australia out for 177. Those were the key moments and key factors from match number 10 of this ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between South Africa and Australia from the BRSA BVE Cricket Stadium. Let's talk about how both South Africa and Australia performed in match number 10 of the ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 from the BRSA BVE Cricket Stadium. First of all, let's start with South Africa and talk about their performance with bat and ball in the match. First of all, let's talk about the batting and how the batters performed. De Kock, 109, Bavuma, 35, van der Dussen, 26, Markram, 56, Klaasen, 29, and Miller, 17. That's how the South African batters went about their business in this match against Australia. South Africa, they've been in good form with the bat in this World Cup, and they followed that in this match against Australia. They batted well. They continued their good batting form. 7 for 311 was a good score in the end for South Africa. That was well than enough runs to win this match quite easily in the end. Pretty good batting performance. They did the basics well with the bat, South Africa, which was pretty good. They ran well between the wickets. They rotated the strike nicely. They punished the bad balls. They put the pressure back on the Australian bowlers. And Quinton de Kock led the way, really. 109 for him off 106 balls. Back-to-back centuries for him, following the 100 he scored against Sri Lanka in the first match for South Africa. So he pretty much led the way, led the charge for South Africa. Aiden Markram soon followed him. Good 56 for Aiden Markram. Good start for him in this World Cup as well. Back-to-back scores of 50 or more to start this World Cup for him. Obviously scored the fastest 100 against Sri Lanka in Cricket World Cup history, when he scored 106 in the first game against Sri Lanka for South Africa. So he's in good touch, Aiden Markram. He and Quinton de Kock batted well. Good contributions from Bavuma, Klaassen, Van der Dussen, Miller, even Marco Jansen as well, towards the tail end for South Africa to get them to that score of 7,311. So South Africa's batting firing all cylinders. They had good partnerships as well. 108 for the first wicket between Bavuma and de Kock, 50 for the second wicket between Van der Dussen and de Kock, and 66 for the fourth wicket between Klaassen and Markram. Pretty much those partnerships were very crucial in terms of posting that score of 311 for South Africa. So nothing more to say about South Africa's batting. All the batters, their top order and middle order is pretty good. They're in good form. They had a good game against Sri Lanka when they scored over 400 runs. In this game against Australia, they were good as well. I think the one area South Africa would be disappointed with in terms of the batting in this match against Australia was probably not finishing the job off towards the back end of the innings. 7 for 311 was a very good score. Obviously, Australia were bowled out for 177, so in the end it was enough anyway. But I think South Africa would have been disappointed not to kick on and get 350, for example. They were well on track to get that sort of score, but the fall of wickets, the loss of wickets towards the back end, pretty much cost them in terms of that acceleration. So it's something for South Africa to look at going into the next match. How can we finish off the innings a bit better after we've set a good foundation and platform to build on? So something for South Africa to look at in the next game. But to finish up about the batting for South Africa, it was a pretty good batting performance, and all the batters, the scoring runs, are in good form for South Africa in this World Cup, which is good signs for the Proteas going forward. So that's the batting. Let's talk about the bowling and the South African bowlers and how they performed in this Cricket World Cup match against Australia. A wicket for Jansen and a wicket for Ngidi. 2 wickets for Maharaj and Shamsi. 3 wickets for Rabada. That's how the bowlers went about their business for South Africa. Pretty good bowling performance by South Africa. To bowl Australia out for 177, defending 311 was a pretty good bowling performance. They took wickets at regular intervals, kept the pressure on Australia. They always took a wicket when they needed to. They kept the pressure on. The fielding was good, and they did a very good job. They used the conditions well to their advantage as well. They had Australia 6 for 70 and 17.2 overs, so that's just an indication of how well South Africa bowled up front, taking the early wickets and really putting the opposition under pressure, which is what you need to do with the ball, especially in one-day cricket. Rabada led the way. 3 wickets for him. He really bowled well. The spinners of Maharaj and Shamsi took 4 wickets between them. They did a job. Ngidi bowled really well up front. He started well to begin his spell. And really, Ngidi was the only one that really got the ball rolling for South Africa in terms of taking the early wickets and building the early pressure. So he did really well there. Marco Jansen was a bit expensive, but he took a wicket, did his job nonetheless. So a very comprehensive bowling performance by South Africa. I think they'll be very pleased with how the bowlers have performed in this World Cup thus far. Obviously, no Anrich Nortje, which is a big blow for them. Obviously, Nortje, he can bowl fast and quick. He was going to be important for South Africa in this World Cup. But I think with South Africa, in terms of the bowling stocks they have, without Anrich Nortje, they're doing a pretty good job. The bowlers are doing a good job because the batters are putting them in a good position in terms of posting big totals and putting pressure on the opposition. That's why the bowlers are performing well for South Africa. So to finish up about South Africa's bowling, comprehensive bowling performance. I think they'll be very pleased with how they bowled. Still a lot of areas to improve on. You look back at the game, you say, we can get better at this department or that. But apart from that, it was a pretty solid bowling performance by the Proteas. And they'll be very pleased with the bowlers' performances in this match. And hopefully for them, it can continue for the rest of the tournament. Let's talk about Australia's performance and how they performed in this match against South Africa. First of all, let's start with the batting side of things and talk about the batting performance by Australia in this match. Mitchell Marsh, 7. Warner, 13. Smith, 19. Labuschagne, 46. Inglis, 5. Maxwell, 3. And Stoinis, 5. That's how the batters went about their business for Australia in this match against South Africa. Australia bowled out for 177 in 40.5 overs, pretty much summed up how Australia have been batting in this World Cup in the first 2 games, but also how they've been batting in one-day cricket for a very long time. Words to describe the batting performance, it was pretty shambolic, if I can say that. It was pretty pathetic. It was pretty substandard. It was below their best. Pretty poor. And chasing a big total of 311, needed 312 to win, obviously, was never going to happen for Australia. As soon as they lost the early wickets, they were 6 for 70 inside the 17.2 overs they faced up until that point of the run chase. It was pretty much game, set and match, and it was inevitable that the result should go the way of South Africa. Once again, the same problems have plagued Australia again. They lost wickets at regular intervals. They didn't they didn't bat well. They lost wickets at regular intervals, I should say. Didn't build partnerships. They had a batting collapse. No one made a big score or converted a big score. The top and middle order failed again. So the same problems with the bat for Australia. They need to fix them quickly. Otherwise, it could get ugly for the rest of this World Cup. So I sound like a broken record every time we talk about Australia's batting in one-day cricket of late. The series against South Africa, the series against India in the lead-up to this World Cup, the same problems again. And in the first 2 games against India and South Africa, the same problems have plagued Australia again. So they need to try and find a way to rectify the problems and fix the problems and bat better. They haven't batted at their best. We know that the batters can bat better than they've shown in this World Cup. Mitchell Marsh is a quality player. David Warner, we know how good he is. Steve Smith is quality. Marnus Labuschagne the same. Josh Inglis can be very good on his day. Glenn Maxwell can change games like that in a matter of minutes. Marcus Stoinis can produce good things. But they haven't quite done that in this World Cup yet, Australia. And it's been very disappointing, and no wonder they find themselves 0-2 to begin the World Cup. And they're severely under pressure now. To finish up about the batting for Australia, pretty poor. They need to address the problems quickly. They need to find a way to fix the problems and to just finally bat with confidence. At the moment, they're not batting with confidence. They're low on confidence with the bat. The batters are not doing the basics well enough. So Australia need to go back to basics with the bat and just do that. Hopefully, that will change the fortunes around going forward for the remaining games of this World Cup. But just to finish up about the batting, before we move on about the bowling, pretty poor, same problems again. They don't seem to learn the lessons. They need to learn quickly. Otherwise, this World Cup could get away from them. So that's the batting performance. Let's talk about the bowling and how the bowlers performed in this match against South Africa for Australia. No wickets for Mitchell Marsh, no wickets for Stoinis, 2 wickets for Maxwell, a wicket for Cummins, Samper and Hazelwood, and 2 wickets for Mitchell Starc. So that's how the Australian bowlers bowled and performed in this match against South Africa. And the bowling was pretty ordinary, pretty poor. Same problems plaguing the bowling as well as the batting for Australia. They struggled to take wickets in the power play. The first 10 overs, they didn't take any wickets. They've struggled with that in recent times. And also the middle overs. They haven't been able to take wickets in the middle overs phase of the match in this World Cup, but also in the games against South Africa and India. In the lead up to this World Cup, they've struggled to take wickets in the first 10 overs of the power play, but also the middle overs as well. And we saw that against South Africa here. They struggled. And also leaking runs as well. Not building pressure with dot balls and not really building that pressure with the ball that they should to be able to take wickets. They haven't quite done that in this match. They didn't do that against India. And they didn't do that in the lead up to the World Cup in terms of the series against South Africa and India as well. So pretty poor again with the bowling for Australia. Also, it doesn't help when you drop catches. in this game against South Africa, they dropped several chances. Some were pretty straightforward, others were pretty difficult, half chances, but some were pretty straightforward and they should have been taken. Some quite interesting stats in terms of the drop catches for Australia in recent times. 57.1% is the lowest catching percentage of any team in this year's Cricket World Cups. So that's pretty alarming for Australia to be on the bottom of the list when it comes to catching efficiency in this Cricket World Cup. Out of all the 10 teams, Australia have the lowest percentage. And also, in terms of the catching percentage in ODIs in 2023, they have a percentage of 66.7%, which is not pretty good. That's the third lowest percentage in terms of catching efficiency in ODIs this year. They're in the bottom three rankings. They're alongside Nepal, who's on 65.9%, and Afghanistan, who's in last place with 62.7%. You don't really associate Australia being that far down in terms of those statistics when it comes to catching efficiency. So their catching and their fielding's been poor. We saw that in this game against South Africa, and we saw it in the first game against India. Misfields, fumbles, drop catches, not really switched on, not really anticipating where the ball will go, misfielding. They haven't been quite switched on in the field either, Australia. And also the body language and all that stuff, the attitude, it hasn't been there at all from Australia. They look a little bit flat. They don't really look G'd up or in the contest. So that's a concern for Australia. They have to turn that around going forward in the other games of this World Cup campaign. Also, another area, they weren't aggressive enough in the field placements or looking to take wickets in this match against South Africa. Now, Pat Cummins won the toss and chose to bowl first because he wasn't unsure about how this surface in Lucknow will play. Obviously, we know this surface in Lucknow has been notorious with turning pitches, very difficult to score, being slow. We saw that in the IPL, and we've also seen that in a few internationals that have been played at this ground. But in the lead up to this World Cup, the pitch was relayed and the groundsman was fired because of those reasons I mentioned before, in terms of the pitch being difficult and all that stuff. So that's why Pat Cummins bowled first, because he wasn't sure. But when you put a side in, when you win the toss, you bowl first, you got to look to take wickets. And this is something that Pat Cummins did in the Ashes as well with Ben Stokes and dealing with Bazball. He was a bit conservative. The same thing happened here again against South Africa, looking to wait until South Africa make a mistake. They weren't really trying to force the issue and trying to put attacking fields in and being aggressive and looking to take wickets. They didn't quite do that. They were looking for a mistake to happen from the South African batters. And that's why they struggled to pick up wickets at regular intervals in this match. So their bowling performance, just like their batting's been pretty ordinary. Nothing much to add on, really, with the bowling. I've pretty much covered everything, really. Just to finish up about their bowling, Australia, pretty poor. They've got a lot of areas to work on. Hopefully they can learn the lessons and hopefully put in a better performance with the ball in the next game they play in this World Cup. Let's preview South Africa's and Australia's next matches in this ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023. Talk about both teams' chances of winning their next game and talking about some of the challenges they may face, but also their potential 11s in terms of who they will select for those games that they will play next in this World Cup. We'll start with South Africa. Their next match is against the Netherlands, and that will be at the HPCA Stadium, and that's in Dharamshala, and that will be on October the 17th. South Africa, based on their current form, you would think they should win that match against the Netherlands. They're very strong. They're in good touch in this World Cup, South Africa. They've gone under the radar. A lot of people don't really rate them highly of winning this World Cup this year, but by the way they've started the tournament, winning the first two games against Sri Lanka and now Australia, in the way they won against Australia, I think many teams will take them seriously. They're playing well, the team's clicking, the batting's good, the bowling's good, everything's clicking for South Africa. So you would think they should win against the Netherlands. The Netherlands are winless. They've lost their first 2 games. They lost against Pakistan for their last game. That was by 99 runs. In the recent game they played in the tournament. So the Netherlands have produced some good performances across the 2 games they've played, but they may struggle against South Africa. But for the Netherlands, they will get some confidence going in this game against South Africa, because in the T20 World Cup last year in Adelaide, they won that amazing game against South Africa in the T20 World Cup last year at the Adelaide Oval. And pretty much knocked out South Africa in terms of them qualifying for the semi-finals. So I know it's a different format in terms of one-day cricket and T20 cricket, but that's something for the Netherlands to be inspired, and hopefully they can put in a good performance again. But you would think South Africa should get the job done there. In terms of the potential 11 that they may select, they'll probably keep the same 11. So De Kock, Bavuma, Van der Dussen, Markram, Klaassen, Miller, Janssen, Rabada, Maharaj, Ngidi and Shamsi. So that's South Africa. Let's talk about Australia. Australia's next game is against Sri Lanka, and that will be on October the 16th, back here at Lucknow at the BRSABVE Cricket Stadium. So Australia playing back-to-back games here at Lucknow. Sri Lanka is their next game. Both teams come into this match winless. Both teams have lost their first 2 games. Both teams need to win badly. Australia, they will need to bounce back well. They will need to win against Sri Lanka to get the campaign off to a good start, because obviously it's been a poor start, losing the first 2 games of the tournament. Sri Lanka, coming into this game, their form has been a bit patchy. They've produced some good performances with the bat, Kusum Mendes and Sama Rakamaria scoring centuries against Pakistan in the last game that Sri Lanka played. So Sri Lanka have been producing good performances with the bat. Their bowling has been a bit depleted with injuries, and they've suffered in this World Cup. Against South Africa, but also against Pakistan, they struggled a bit. So Sri Lanka struggling for form of late in this World Cup. Also, they won't have their captain, Dasun Shanaka. He'll be out because of injury, so that's a big blow for Sri Lanka, not having the captain there. They've been heavily depleted with injury in this World Cup, so that's not good for Sri Lanka losing the captain. So Australia, they will need to work on the areas that they need to work on. Hopefully for them, they can put in a good batting performance and a bowling performance and a fielding performance that it's pretty good, and it's a performance that we know from an Australian team. They will need to win well against Sri Lanka. If Australia can do that, hopefully they will get their confidence back. But they will need to start turning things around in this game against Sri Lanka. In terms of the potential 11 that they may select, it's easier said than done to make wholesale changes in terms of let's just change the 11 because we're losing. I think they'll keep the same 11. I think it's important not to make massive changes when you're in this type of situation. It's important to keep the team as whole as you can. So I think they'll keep the same 11 for the match against Sri Lanka. So Mitchell Marsh, David Warner, Steve Smith, Marnus Labuschagne, Josh Inglis, Glenn Maxwell, Marcus Stoinis, Mitchell Starc, Pat Cummins, Adam Zampa, and Josh Hazlewood. My final thoughts to end our review of match number 10 of this ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between South Africa and Australia. It was a pretty dominant, comprehensive victory by South Africa. Winning the way they did by 134 runs against Australia is a big statement to make, especially in this World Cup. South Africa, one of the informed teams. I think many of the teams will take notice of South Africa. They're genuine contenders now. So for South Africa, it's a good start for them. Still a long way to go in the tournament, but South Africa, they've started well. They've given themselves a good chance of qualifying for the semi-finals. They'll be very delighted with how things are going at the moment. So it was a very good win against Australia. For Australia, on the other hand, 0-2 is a disappointing start to the tournament. They haven't played at their best. They've been below par. They're under pressure now. No team has ever won a Cricket World Cup being 0-2 to start the tournament. And especially when this current format of 10 teams has been introduced, no team has ever come back from none and two to win the World Cup. So for Australia, they'll have to create some history for that to happen. They are definitely up against it. They've only got themselves to blame for being in this situation because they haven't played at their best. It's been pretty poor. So they will need to bounce back. They will need to bounce back quickly. They will need to win some games, get their confidence back. So hopefully they can do that. If you're an Australian fan, hopefully the team can do that. But for Australia, it was a very disappointing performance in this game against South Africa. Very poor with the bat, very poor with the ball, and very poor in the field. They will need to rectify those key areas of the game of cricket to try and bounce back and gain some confidence in this World Cup and hopefully win a game. And hopefully try and qualify for the semi-finals. But there's still a lot of cricket to be played. And for Australia, it's not all doom and gloom. They've got an opportunity to bounce back. But they will need to bounce back quickly. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, our match review of match number 10 of this ICC Cricket World Cup for 2023 between South Africa and Australia. Stay tuned for more ICC Cricket World Cup 2023 episodes and live streams on the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this match between South Africa and Australia in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.